August 1931, a submarine approaches the edge of the known world. It's about to enter a massive frozen unknown, a part of the world that remains largely unexplored. On board are a group of daring explorers determined to uncover the Arctic's great mysteries, setting out to not only reach the top of the world, but to discover what lies hidden beneath it in a new kind of exploration machine. Enduring cramped conditions and frigid temperatures, they'll push ahead for thousands of kilometers under the ice. But as days turn to weeks, the expedition will go horribly wrong. Today on Terminal Defect, we will be uncovering what happened to the Nautilus. For centuries, explorers tried to reach the top of the world using ships, battling frigid temperatures and treacherous sea ice. Their vessels often became trapped, stranding crews with little hope of rescue. Later, explorers tried dogsleds or even on foot, often tragically. Hundreds of explorers perished. So challenging was the Arctic that the first undisputed discovery of the North Pole wasn't until 1926, from the air in a modified airship. When explorer Sir Hubert Wilkins planned to set foot on the North Pole, he believed a submarine was the best way, equipped with the latest scientific instruments to solve the Arctic's mysteries. Wilkins would set off in the summer, sailing across the Atlantic, then up to the Arctic Circle. His expedition would head west, spanning over 3,000 kilometers. For 6 weeks, he'd zigzag under the ice, emerging through any openings, before ending in Alaska. To fund the expedition, Wilkins used his savings and raised money. He lectured and wrote a book outlining his ambitious plans, but it wasn't enough. He needed serious backing, and turning his pursuit into a media sensation was the answer. A sea ice voyage would sell newspapers, so Wilkins made a deal with newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst. Hearst would get exclusive publishing rights, and Wilkins would get funding. To create more buzz, Hearst planned for Wilkins to meet a second expedition at the pole. The airship Graf Zeppelin would fly overhead as Wilkins emerged from the ice. If successful, Hearst promised a $150,000 prize. All that was left was to find a submarine. Wilkins planned to reach the North Pole in the Nautilus, a retired World War I-era attack submarine heavily modified by renowned naval architect Simon Lake. The voyage would be fraught with danger, including the risk of collision with sea ice. To mitigate this, Lake reinforced the Nautilus's bow with heavy steel plates and concrete, and added a hydraulic impact absorber to soften the blow. The ice above also posed a deadly threat, so Lake fitted the topside with sledge runners, allowing it to slide along the bottom of the ice like a toboggan. A hydraulic retractable guide arm would help maintain a safe distance from hazards above. The Nautilus could be confined under the ice for days at a time, but would eventually need to surface to take on air and recharge its batteries. A lack of openings in the ice could doom the crew. To address this, Lake innovated a series of drills capable of boring through up to 20 feet of ice, allowing the crew to reach the surface. In place of the original torpedo tubes, Lake added a pressurized diving chamber for lowering instruments to the ocean floor or conducting dives. Simon Lake made dozens of modifications. Originally built for World War I, the Nautilus would now have to battle Mother Nature.
We're just having things on board now for the final inspection before leaving the dockyard. We expect in about 6 or 8 months to have made the trip 2,000 miles under the ice, starting from Spitsbergen somewhere about the 1st of July.
On March 16, 1931, as the expedition prepared to set off, Wilkins put on a brave face for reporters. The men are just having things on board now for the final inspection before leaving the dockyard. We expect in about 6 or 8 months to have made the trip 2,000 miles under the ice, starting from Spitsbergen somewhere about the 1st of July. But deep down, Wilkins was worried. He feared many of the sub's novel features were unnecessary, even dangerous. He had reservations about the sledge runners, the ice drills, and the shock absorber, which he worried would lodge itself into the ice, trapping the Nautilus beneath the surface. Wilkins insisted on installing a photosensitive electrical cell to measure the thickness of the ice above so he'd know where to surface, but Simon Lake denied the request. The Nautilus was Lake's submarine. He had the final word on any modifications. Wilkins merely subchartered it for the expedition and had to accept it as it was. The wonder gadgets caused headaches before the expedition even began, repeatedly forcing the sub back into port for repairs. Confirming Wilkins's worst fears, the ice drills didn't work during testing, and a separate engineering firm was called in. By June, Wilkins had had enough. Mechanical issues be damned. it was time to get going. The journey across the Atlantic was grueling. The tiny sub was easily tossed around by fierce North Atlantic storms. The crew were also beginning to learn just how uncomfortable the Nautilus was. The submarine was cramped and claustrophobic to begin with. Now loaded up for the expedition, there was even less space. For 20 men, there was just a single toilet out in the open between two roaring diesel engines. The crew would have to spend their entire day standing because there wasn't anywhere to sit. Only a handful of bunks, shared amongst the men, provided any relief. Wilkins sent Hearst daily radio updates, documenting the harrowing journey.
This morning, an extra heavy wave swept the decks and carried away the screen before the bridge.
Nearly everyone aboard was seasick. And when the Nautilus's bilge pump failed, sewage, oil, and vomit began to swill around the crew's feet. But as the tiny sub battled the fierce Atlantic, things only got worse.
The cylinder of our starboard engine is badly cracked.
Forced to shut down one of its two engines, the Nautilus could only limp forward. On June 13th, a week into the journey, the Nautilus stopped sending radio updates. And for several days, no one had any idea about the fate of the sub and its crew. On June 15th, the battleship Wyoming found the Nautilus drifting aimlessly about 1,000 kilometers northeast of the Azores. Both engines had failed, and the batteries were dead. Wilkins would now face the humiliation of having his sub towed the rest of the way across the Atlantic. Worse still, 4 crew members quit, and the Nautilus once again needed major repairs. It would take weeks for replacement parts to arrive from the United States. It meant there was no longer enough time to catch up with the Graf Zeppelin. And in a stunning blow, Wilkins could no longer claim Hearst's prize money. The media also turned against him, running headlines that openly mocked his expedition. Wilkins was under mounting pressure. His submarine didn't work. His crew was demoralized, and winter was fast approaching. At this point, just about anyone else would have thrown in the towel. But this was Sir Hubert Wilkins. Even months behind schedule, Wilkins pressed ahead. On July 28th, the expedition finally left for the North Pole. The Nautilus was still riddled with problems, but the crew had gotten used to making repairs on the go, and any major issues were fixed during scheduled stops. By August 15th, the Nautilus had reached the last inhabited land before the Arctic, and Wilkins was finally sending out upbeat progress reports. And on the 19th, the Nautilus reached the first ice floes. To celebrate, the men were given a break from the cramped conditions and began collecting scientific data. Back home, Hearst relayed fascinating new discoveries, like a warmer layer of water deep below the surface, thought to be vital for predicting weather. After traveling a week in the ice, the Nautilus reached 82 degrees north, further than any vessel had ever made it under its own power. It looked like Wilkins would actually do it. He would travel 1,000 kilometers under the ice. But as the world read about Wilkins's achievements on board the Nautilus, things were not as they seemed. Wilkins had, once again, merely put on a brave face. In reality, the crew were exhausted and freezing. The Nautilus had no heat or insulation. Nothing but bare metal separated them from the frigid Arctic waters. The crew were constantly sickened with food poisoning and dosed with lead from the soldering in the submarine's pipes. Attempting the pole this late in the season would be extremely dangerous, and without exception, everyone wanted to turn around and head home. Everyone except Wilkins. On August 22nd, he gave the order to dive beneath the ice, but the Nautilus refused. The diving rudder, the mechanism that controls vertical motion underwater, just wouldn't respond. Wilkins sent a diver to investigate, and he soon returned with a stunning discovery. The rudder had simply disappeared. Maybe it had fallen off, and somehow no one noticed. Or maybe, as Wilkins suspected, the crew had sabotaged the sub in an attempt to end the expedition. By this point, even Hearst was publicly urging Wilkins to return home. But again, things weren't what they seemed. In a private message, the Hearst Corporation pressured Wilkins to continue to the pole, reminding him of their agreement. And that left Wilkins with an impossible decision: return home to certain failure and financial ruin, or press on and risk the lives of the crew. On August 31st, Wilkins ordered the ballast tanks flooded and trim set 2 degrees down. He would force the Nautilus to submerge by ramming under the ice. The sound of the sledge runners scraping against the ice reverberated right through the superstructure, as if the Nautilus was being torn apart. It's as though Wilkins had lost his mind. He couldn't possibly reach the pole in the crippled sub. But faced with an endless string of setbacks, Wilkins seemed determined to prove a point. They pushed on for several kilometers before Wilkins ordered a test of the ice drills. For hours, the crew tried in vain to bore through just a few feet of ice. Each time, Simon Lake's patented drill would only go so far before jamming. It was hopeless. On September 6th, Wilkins finally sent out the radio transmission that by now, everyone was hoping for.
Our Arctic trip is over.
Wilkins had taken the Nautilus where no submarine had ever gone before. But it would be another 3 decades before anyone successfully traversed the Arctic underneath the ice. Sharing the same name, the nuclear-powered USS Nautilus could stay submerged for weeks at a time. It made its first polar crossing in 1958, returning home to huge fanfare. By that point, Wilkins's attempt had long been forgotten. The original Nautilus now lies sunk on the ocean floor off the coast of Norway. After the crew returned from the Arctic, the sub was deemed too worn and damaged to be worth saving, and it was deliberately sunk. Prior to the Nautilus expedition, Wilkins was considered among the greatest explorers of the 20th century, having made immense contributions to our understanding of the North and South Poles. But his final expedition left him financially ruined and largely forgotten by history. After passing away at the age of 70, Wilkins's final wishes were fulfilled when the crew of the USS Skate scattered his ashes at the North Pole. On June 23, 2018, the boys of the Wild Boars Football Club set out for training as usual. They were a football team of boys aged 11 to 16, with a coach and an assistant coach. Training went on as expected, and the head coach said goodbye to his players, preparing for the older team's upcoming game and setting his phone aside. A few hours later, when the coach checked his phone, he found countless missed calls from the boys' parents. The children hadn't returned home, despite hours having passed. The coach started calling his players individually, but none of the children, nor the team's assistant coach, could be reached. Finally, one player, Sangpol, a 13-year-old team member, answered the phone from home, where he had been picked up by his mother. He informed the coach that the other team members had ridden their bicycles to the nearby Tam Luang caves to explore them together with their assistant coach. As the coach and parents began to understand the situation, worry turned into urgent action. The Tam Luang caves, known for their extensive and complex network of tunnels, posed a significant risk, especially with the onset of the rainy season. The parents and the coach quickly organized a search party, hoping to find the boys and their assistant coach safe and sound. Little did they know that this would mark the beginning of a dramatic and grueling rescue mission that would capture the attention of the entire world. The upcoming video will delve into the extraordinary efforts, the international collaboration, and the unwavering spirit that defined this remarkable rescue operation. Stay tuned as we uncover the details of how the Wild Boars adventure turned into a tale of survival and heroism against all odds. That's all for this video. Please like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification for more such videos. Thanks for watching.